Hello and welcome to this third edition of Diverse Talks. My name is Darren Brunton and I'm going to be your host for this session. And it's really exciting. If you remember and you watched our earlier Diverse Talk, we were lucky and honoured to have Chris Lemons on the show with us. And today we're taking where Chris was before to the depths of the sea and the ocean on the seabed, 80, 100 plus meters below the water. We're taking it to the new heights. We're pleased to welcome Grant Rawlinson, who is an adventurer, a public speaker, a coach, and an influencer across many industries. Now, Grant has gone to the highest mountain in the world, Mt Everest, not once, but twice. He's also done some fantastic other adventure activities. And with that, I want to welcome Grant to Diverse Talks. We're going to hopefully he's going to share with us some of the leadership, some of the challenges he's faced over this period of his adventures, and we'll take away a lot of lessons from this session. So welcome, Grant. Welcome. Please say a few words, and the floor's yours for now.
Hey, Darren, it's absolutely awesome to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. And just what a fantastic initiative that you have here with these Diverse Talks, and having Chris on the show, the session before me. Wow, what an inspirational story that is. So I'm really looking forward to today's session and what we're going to dive into.
Thanks so much. And we're going to be covering, out of the Diverse Talk name, we're actually going to be covering a few of the topics there. We're going to be covering variety, expertise, entertainment, and safety, because Grant covers all these aspects with his career and his life. So first off, I would like to just ask you what drove you and puts you in a position and drives you to have that life of adventure?
Oh, well, great question to start off with, Darren. I hope the questions will get easier. That's a really difficult one to start with. Well, I would say that it started at a very early age. You know, I grew up in a very rural sheep farming environment in New Zealand. And I always loved adventuring from a very early age, living on the farm. And I never really, riding motorbikes, it was a bit of fun, and riding horses, etc. That was okay. But really, I've always from my earliest memories, lent towards using my own human power to travel. So as I've grown up, I really, that kind of festered, and it grew into this, what is now my life purpose, really, which is to make exploratory human-powered journeys around the globe, which contribute to a brighter future for our planet. So it's very much a purpose-driven thing, and I firmly believe that it's my purpose in life. That's the reason that I'm here. So the roots grow very deep, Darren.
Right. I can connect with you a lot on that in my previous life and life up to now with adventure, the outdoor life, as what we used to do when we were growing up. And now I know you've got a couple of young twins, in fact, 4-year-old twins, daughters, and your social media posts are absolutely fantastic in the sense of what you're doing with them to get them out and about, particularly over the last few months. So how do you fit that with the adventure and the dangerous lifestyle that you have covered, which we'll cover in a short while, into the family life, and what influence does that have on your 4-year-olds, and how do they see that as daddy doing that with regards to the academic world that we know in society today, the kids of today are driven to be more academic than possibly adventurous?
Yeah, another difficult question there, Darren, but I firmly believe that, I firmly believe in this concept of anti-fragility. And to answer your question, I would just love to explain this concept of what it takes to be anti-fragile. You can think of something which is fragile. This coffee cup sitting on my table here is fragile. If there is some external influence or some pressure on that, it will break easily. Then we think, well, what's the opposite of fragile? And you think, well, it's probably resilient, or it's robust, or it's strong, something that can hold its shape under pressure. But really the opposite of fragile, if a fragile thing breaks under pressure, then the opposite of fragile cannot just be resilient or robust. It must be something that gets stronger under pressure. And a resilient thing, generally by definition, doesn't necessarily get stronger under pressure. It holds its shape. Okay. Now, this concept of anti-fragility, things which actually become stronger under pressure, is absolutely fascinating. We can see it in the human body, like bones, for example. You break a bone. I've broken so many bones in my bodies, and generally they always heal back stronger when they heal back. We see it in relationships. You can see people have very fragile relationships, or anti-fragile relationships. When things change, they actually get stronger and those bonds become even stronger. We can see it in strategies in the business world. Businesses, especially during coronavirus, who are fragile have just fallen to bits as soon as the situation changed. You see those businesses which are resilient and saying, we just want to hold it. We want to hold on to what we had before. We want to get through this and come out the other side in the same spot. And then you see certain parts of the business community which are thriving at this time. They're thriving on the change and disruption. Well, if you apply the concept of anti-fragility to children, I believe that too many parents are trying to make their children resilient, not anti-fragile. And by making them resilient, you're putting up these barriers around them to protect them and keep them in, keep them from falling over and harming themselves or doing things, or, or doing things which the consequences of adventuring, can incur. But by doing that, by trying to impose resilience, making them resilient by putting up barriers, we actually are making them more fragile. So I'm very much drawn towards this concept of anti-fragility, which means letting them get out there on their bicycles, climbing wherever we can, kayaking and paddling in the kayak, swimming in the seas. Yes, they're going to fall off. Yes, they're going to hurt themselves, but teaching them to do these kind of things in a way which they're not going to kill themselves. Teaching them to do these things safely as possible, which is a big part of what you do as well, is really what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to go out there and scare them senseless. I'm not looking to, to do things which are going to necessarily put their lives at unnecessary risk. But at the same time, you can't walk out the front door these days without some kind of danger. And so it's really confronting that and getting them used to it, and creating kids which have this anti-fragile mindset. Hope that answers your question.
Well, that's a fantastic answer. You say my questions are challenging and difficult, but that answer was challenging on its own in one sense, because you're sharing that anti-fragility and that resilience, not just for the children, but the adults need to take that on board as well. And we'll move into that business climate in a short while, but that answer was just absolutely rock, mate. It was really good. Thank you very much for sharing that. So during your adventures, I'm sure you've had times where you think, what am I doing here? And why me? Or how can I get home? Or something like that. And so what actually drives you to do these adventures? And maybe you can explain some of the adventures that you have done. And when you get to those difficult, challenging points, what drives you to keep going? And get to the end of it. I noticed there's a picture. I believe that's Everest in the background behind your head there, behind your ear.
That's right. That's Everest from the north side, and based in Tibet. So, in a nutshell, Darren, I've walked across countries, I've cycled across continents, rode across many seas, and climbed many mountains around the world. So my passion, my purpose is making these exploratory human-powered journeys around the globe. So over 20 years, I've had some very interesting experiences. And what you just said is absolutely it's wonderful, because there is a massively over-glorified romantic view sometimes of having an adventure. People are like, well, you're outdoors, the sun is shining. You're at the end of a beautiful day. You're cooking some food over the campfire, and you're bonding with your friends, and it's just looking at the sunset, and life couldn't be much better. But of course, in reality, that is very, very seldom the case. The reality of the expeditions that I go on is that at times they are brutal. Living 78 days and nights on a tiny little rowing boat with enormous amount of risk and uncertainty every single day, waking up every single 2 hours for 78 days and nights in a row to row a boat for 2 hours. There's times when you go through those expeditions where you just think, what am I doing here? How did I ever get in? Why did I even think this was a good idea in the first place?
Yeah, exactly.
And this really sorts out. The main principle here, Darren, is whether you're leading a purpose-driven life or not. And for me, that always comes back to the fact that this is what I'm meant to do. And you cannot just take certain instances out of a life and determine whether they make you happy or not. It's the bigger picture. And there's a very big difference in life between being happy and being fulfilled. People who are very purpose-driven have a very strong sense of fulfillment how they lead their life. And that's different to just doing something that makes you happy. If I met you tonight and had a beer with you, Darren, we'd be happy. It would be great fun, right? We would have a bit of a laugh. That doesn't mean that our lives, we want to have beers every night together and that's going to be our lives because it makes us happy. That's different to a sense of fulfillment. So what keeps me going on these journeys is the fact that it's a purpose. And when it's purpose-driven, it gives you so much motivation to go through those bad times because there's a bigger thing there that you're aiming towards.
I think that's a fantastic response because that's related to your adventures, and you can pull that back into the society of today. I was only talking to somebody yesterday with regards, are they happy in what they're doing in their employment, in their life, and what they're doing now? And you cannot keep going on something just because it's there. You have to have that purpose, like you say. You have to have that goal, that vision. Doesn't matter it's now, in 6 months' time, or 12 months' time. But without that, and summarizing what you said there, you've got to have that drive, right? You've got to have that mindset. That's very important to achieve these aspects and go for your dream, if you like. So that's a fantastic answer and well shared. Thank you. So with that, you've actually gone not just up Everest twice, but you've also, like you mentioned, you've gone across the oceans. So I believe you rode from Singapore to Australia, was it? And then tried to get onto New Zealand. And with that, those challenges in that, you've got the diverse challenges from climbing a mountain to rowing across the sea in the oceans. So we can just imagine the difficulties and the challenges that you have faced and had to deal with. You've obviously had some highs and lows through those. Are you able to share maybe one particular high and one particular low that you learned from and that's driven you and carried you forward in your career for today?
Yeah, so I will actually share two with you. The first one, my first Everest expedition, which turned into a complete failure. An Everest expedition is for 2 months, and typically it's you spend 45 days acclimatizing before you get into a period to go for the summit. On that particular expedition, I didn't acclimatize well. I got pulmonary edema. I was very weak. I was the weakest member of the team. When we chose the weather window to go for the summit, it wasn't a good weather window. Everything just went wrong, and I came back from there having prepared for that for 3 years, and hoping it would be one of the climaxes of my life, to having this miserable experience where it was just one setback after another setback after another setback. Now, the other big setback that I've faced, more recently than that is I mounted this expedition with a $500,000 budget to row a boat from Singapore back to New Zealand. I managed to get to the east coast of Australia in 123 days of human-powered travel, 9,000 kilometers from Singapore. I had that last little bit to cross, which is called the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand. And in the last 2.5 years, I've attempted that 3 times to make that crossing. I've actually rowed 3,000 kilometers now on the Tasman Sea, but I've never made it across to New Zealand. I've been smashed in storms and hit in counter currents and rescued by helicopter and all sorts of things. And I haven't finished that expedition off at that particular stage. Now, you could say, wow, there are some, I'm still alive, but there are some pretty big setbacks and failures. But I always say that, especially for me in my business, that those failures are the reason that my business is successful at the moment. When I go and speak to audiences, speak to crowds, speak to teams, they don't want to know that, well, this person had a goal, they did some planning, then they went out there, they achieved the goal, they come home and everything worked brilliantly. I always say that if that is your story and you want to influence people with a story like that, I feel sorry for you. I really literally do. Not in a sarcastic way. I literally feel sorry for you because there is very few learning points in that story for anybody. Okay. Where people learn, where people are inspired is seeing when you literally fall off the edge of a cliff, where you literally are trying something so big that the risks are right there, the uncertainties there, things are definitely going to go wrong. You fall off the cliff. How do you recover and come out the other side of that? So what I've learned, and I'm not saying that I love failing or having setbacks in any way, but man, they are so powerful. They have changed my entire life. I am so grateful for never getting to Everest on my first attempt. I'm so grateful that the Tasman Sea has kicked my butt 3 times in a row, because I'm still going to go out there for a 4th time, but the learnings, the stories, the experience that has given me is something that I just would never trade in the entire universe, Darren.
Yeah, and that's very powerful as well. I mean, it's not about success. It's about how many times you fail and what you do to pick yourself back up, whether you get success at the end of that or not. But if you fail, you can't just fail, right? You need to be able to have that mindset and that determination to get back up and continue in whatever direction it may be. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really good. And you mentioned there about your career and your work now as a professional speaker. We've mentioned also about human power. So I'd like you to explain, what's the concept of human power? How has that fitted in with your now career? Well, you're waiting, I guess, to go and row across the oceans again. And, what's this year, 2020, been for you? Because it's been so challenging. I know as public speakers, you normally get out there in front of crowds and reap it up. But that's all been shut down. How have you managed to diverse and still remain successful? And what's your view, your outlook of the next 12 months? We can't really go too much further than that.
Great question there, Darren. So this year, like many people, I literally was sitting there here in January thinking, what a wonderful year this is going to be for business. I was very excited. And then literally it was like being punched in the face at the start of February when the order book for the next 2 months just went closed shut. And it was like, what is happening? Things were looking so good in January that together with my wife, we went to New Zealand and we signed up a house, a brand new property in New Zealand. So we'd made this big financial commitment, projecting into the future about how the business was going. And I'm going to be very honest that February and March for me were a very, very difficult period, because literally I went from, a forecasted and a revenue, which is up here, to zero. It wasn't just like, here's a little bit, it just went to zero. And there was so much uncertainty at that particular time. I was just like, what's going to happen? Where are we going to go here? And I just had this property and I had this massive financial commitment. And I definitely suffered from that a little bit in February and March. I remember I started having chest pains and having these it was just all brought on from anxiety. I was getting out and going for runs every day, still trying to get out and about. But I remember one day I was out going for a run and I just had to stop at a bus stop because my chest was just tightening up so much. And I was just so anxious. And it's not as if when you work for yourself, as you know, or you have your own business, it can be a lonely existence sometimes, right? You can't literally go. I worked in the corporate world for many years, and you have this massive net of people you can go and speak to. So definitely a tough couple of months there. Fortunately, necessity is the mother of invention. So this whole virtual world was something that I realized we're just going to have to jump on the bandwagon very quickly here, and manage to transition almost everything we do across to a virtual platform. But just because you can do it virtually doesn't mean necessarily people want it virtually. So in those first few months, there was still some resistance, from a lot of the market in terms of, can we do these conferences? Can we do these talks virtually? In the last 2 or 3 months, business has just come back at the same level that it was pre-COVID, at least for my business. Everything's virtual, of course, well, 99% of stuff still. So people have really pivoted and adapted to that, this change. But where do I see it going in the next 12 months? That is an absolutely fantastic question. I don't know. I think it's one of the most difficult decision-making environments, and I specifically talk about decision-making. I am a decision-making coach. That's what I talk with corporates. This is one of the most difficult decision-making environments that I can ever recall being in at this kind of scale. And my advice generally to people at this time is, don't try and predict the future too much. Keep a very short-term view about making big strategic decisions for now, and stay agile, stay as agile as possible. There definitely will be opportunities that will come, but I don't really think we're in the middle of a storm at the moment. And storms generally are not the best time to make massive strategic decisions about the future of your project. So keep agile and keep nimble.